The transport ship glided through the silent void of space, its silver hull catching the faint glow of the nearby sun. Inside the ship, Aaron sat near a viewing port, watching the stars pass like tiny sparks. He was not a soldier or a diplomat. He was a medic, trained to heal and to bring comfort to the wounded. His hands had seen more bandages and splints than weapons, and yet he was now on his way to the capital world of the Serath, a species far older and more advanced than his own. Aaron had been chosen because of his calm nature and his skill in the field. Humanity and the Serath were building new ties, and trust was not easy to win. The Serath respected strength, but they also respected wisdom. A medic, who placed value on life itself, seemed to be the right symbol for this fragile beginning. When the ship broke atmosphere, Aaron leaned forward to see the alien city. Towering spires reached into the clouds, their surfaces made of shining crystal that reflected the sun like fire. Bridges stretched between the towers, and ships moved in steady lines across the sky. At the base of the city, wide plazas were filled with green gardens and flowing water that sparkled like glass. It was a place of both beauty and discipline, where every stone seemed to have been set with care. As the ship landed, a group of Serath guards approached. Their armor was smooth and silver, covering tall and slender forms. Their eyes were sharp, their faces calm but unreadable. Aaron stepped out carefully, holding no weapon, only the small medical pack strapped to his side. He bowed his head slightly as he had been taught. The Serath did not bow in return, but one of them spoke with a voice that carried strength and calm authority. He welcomed the human envoy and said that the council awaited. Aaron walked with them through a long passage of glass walls that looked out over the city. Everything was grand, yet quiet. The Serath did not waste words or gestures. They moved like flowing water, controlled and graceful. At last, they reached a great hall where banners of deep blue hung from high pillars. Seated at the center was the Serath Council, a circle of elders with pale skin that shimmered faintly under the light. But standing beside them was a figure who drew Aaron's attention more than all the rest. It was the princess, Illyra. She was young by Serath years, though older than Aaron in human measure. Her eyes were bright like polished stone, her hair flowing with a natural silver tone. She wore robes of white and blue, simple yet carrying an air of dignity. Where the elders were distant and severe, she looked upon the human medic with open curiosity. The leader of the council spoke first. Words of welcome were offered, but also words of caution. The Serath had suffered betrayal from other species before, and their trust was not easily earned. Aaron listened carefully, answering with honesty when asked about his duty. He said he had come not to fight, not to command, but to heal. His hands were meant to mend wounds, no matter if the injured were human or Serath. The elders studied him in silence. They did not smile, but they did not reject him either. Then Illyra stepped forward. She asked if it was true that humans sometimes gave their own lives to protect others. Aaron nodded and told her that among his people, there was no greater honor than saving a life, even if it meant losing your own. The princess tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand such an idea. To her, raised in a court where every move was measured, such selflessness was rare. She said she wished to see how a human medic worked, for she had heard that they carried skill not only in medicine but also in courage. That request surprised the council, but they allowed it. Illyra was known for her curiosity, and perhaps her presence could test the human sincerity. Later that day, Aaron was brought to the medical wing of the city. It was a place filled with soft lights and quiet voices. Serath healers moved with calm precision, using tools that blended light and sound to repair injuries. Aaron felt both humbled and challenged. Their technology was far beyond human medicine, but still, they watched him with interest as he treated a wounded guard brought in with a broken arm. Aaron worked with simple methods. He cleaned the wound, wrapped it with firm bandages, and spoke to the soldier with reassuring words. His hands were steady, his tone gentle. The Seraph healers noticed that while their tools repaired flesh, the human medic's approach also gave comfort. The guard's breath slowed, his eyes eased, and he looked calmer when Aaron finished. Illyria stood nearby, her gaze fixed on every motion. She asked why he spoke to the soldier while working. Aaron explained that pain was not only in the body, but also in the mind, and sometimes a few words could ease more suffering than any tool. The princess nodded slowly, as if she was storing away every word. As the day ended, Aaron returned to his quarters. The city outside his window was glowing under the night sky, the towers lit with faint blue light. He felt the weight of the day, yet also a spark of hope. The Seraph were proud and cautious, but perhaps through patience and honesty, he could help build a bridge. Far away in the palace, Illyria spoke quietly to her advisors. She told them the human medic was different, not weak but strong in a way that was difficult to measure. She said she wished to learn more about him, for perhaps his kind carried a strength that her people had long forgotten. Neither knew what the days ahead would bring, but the first thread of trust had been woven. The days passed quietly in the Seraph capital, though beneath the beauty of the shining towers there was tension that never fully faded. Aaron, the human medic, spent his time in the medical wing, tending to injured soldiers and learning the ways of Seraph healing. His presence was tolerated by the council, but it was Princess Illyria who visited often, her eyes bright with curiosity and thought. The city streets were filled with the sound of flowing water and the soft hum of crystal engines, but behind the harmony there were whispers. Rival factions opposed the growing friendship between humans and Seraph. Some saw it as weakness, others as a threat to their traditions. The council spoke of peace in public, yet guards tightened their patrols, and shadowed figures lingered in alleys where the lights did not always reach. Aaron noticed this unease during his walks to the gardens. The Seraph citizens looked at him with cautious eyes. Some bowed their heads politely, while others turned away, their expressions sharp and cold. He did not take offense. He understood fear, for humans too had once struggled to trust outsiders. One morning, Aaron was summoned to the barracks where several Seraph soldiers had been injured during a border clash with raiders. Though the Seraph had advanced medical tools, the commander insisted that Aaron assist, saying that the council wanted to see how the human worked under pressure. Aaron accepted without hesitation. Inside the barracks, the wounded lay on silver cots. One soldier's leg was broken, another had deep burns across his arm, and a third was barely conscious from a blow to the head. Aaron moved quickly, setting broken bones with steady hands, cooling burns with simple salves from his pack, and speaking to each patient in calm tones. The Seraph healers worked beside him, using their crystal devices to mend tissues and close wounds. At first, they seemed to doubt him, watching his every move, but as time passed they began to nod with respect. Aaron's methods were slower, yet his touch carried reassurance. He did not only treat the body, he also spoke to the spirit. When the commander returned, he saw his soldiers breathing easier and even smiling faintly, something rare among the Seraph. He looked at Aaron and said, "You have a way of making pain smaller, even when the wound remains. That is not something our tools can do." Aaron bowed his head in gratitude. He explained that humans believed healing was more than closing wounds. It was about giving hope, because without hope, no body could truly recover. Later that evening, Illyra arrived at the medical wing. She had heard of Aaron's work in the barracks and wished to see for herself. She walked through the quiet hall, her robes brushing the polished floor, her eyes soft as she looked at the recovering soldiers. Some of them lowered their heads respectfully, for word of the human medic's kindness was spreading. Illyra found Aaron checking the bandages of a soldier who had been burned. She asked if she could watch, and he agreed. As he worked, she noticed how he spoke gently, asking the soldier about his family and his dreams beyond the war. The soldier, though weary, spoke with more strength than before. When the soldier finally rested, Illyra turned to Aaron. "Why do you ask such questions while tending to wounds?" she asked. Aaron answered simply. "Pain makes people feel small. When they remember who they are, when they think of what they love, they find strength to fight through the pain. My words remind them that they are more than their injuries." The princess was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on him. At last, she said, "Among my people, healers are respected, but they do not speak so much. They focus on precision, not comfort. Perhaps we have forgotten something." Aaron did not claim to know better. He only smiled gently and said, "Every hand has its way. Mine happens to use words as well as bandages." Over the next days, Illyra returned again and again. Sometimes she asked questions about human life. She wanted to know how families lived, how children were raised, how soldiers were treated when they returned from war. Aaron answered with honesty, describing both the struggles and the joys of his people. Through these talks, Illyra began to see a side of humanity that the council did not speak of. To them, humans were young and reckless, rushing into the stars with little patience. But in Aaron's stories, she heard of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. She began to believe that perhaps her people could learn something from these newcomers. Yet outside the medical wing, the city grew more tense. Rumors spread of plots against the council. Some claimed that assassins planned to strike at the heart of the palace. Others whispered that humans were secretly the cause of the unrest. Suspicion grew, and Aaron sometimes felt the weight of hostile stares when he walked in public. One evening, as he crossed a quiet plaza on his way back to his quarters, he saw a group of Seraph youths blocking his path. Their voices were sharp, their words filled with anger. They accused him of bringing danger to their city, of placing their princess at risk with his presence. Aaron did not answer with anger. He simply raised his hands calmly and said that he came only to heal, not to harm. The youths did not attack, but their eyes burned with distrust. They left after a moment, leaving Aaron alone under the pale light of the towers. He sighed softly, knowing that trust was not built in days. The next morning, Illyra came to see him again. She noticed the weariness in his eyes and asked what troubled him. Aaron hesitated but then told her of the encounter in the plaza. The princess frowned and said, "There are many who fear change. They do not see what I see. But you must not let their fear weaken you. If you stand firm, others will learn to trust." Her words carried a strength that surprised him. Though young, Illyra spoke with the heart of a leader. Aaron bowed his head and thanked her. In that moment, he felt a bond growing, not of politics or duty, but of shared understanding. As the days turned to weeks, the fragile peace held, but the whispers of danger grew louder. Aaron continued his work, healing the wounded and speaking words of comfort, while Illyra watched with thoughtful eyes. Neither knew that the storm was drawing closer, but both could feel its weight in the air. And yet, in the midst of unease, something new was forming, trust between a human medic and an alien princess. The capital city of the Seraph shone as brightly as ever, with its crystal towers glowing in the morning sun, yet Aaron could feel a change in the air. The quiet harmony he had first seen now carried a note of tension. The guards moved in tighter formations. Market stalls closed earlier than usual. Citizens spoke in hushed voices. Something unseen was pressing down upon the city. Aaron continued his work in the medical wing, tending to the injured soldiers and teaching young Seraph apprentices how to use bandages and herbal salves. Though their tools were far more advanced, many of them began to respect the human's way of mixing care with comfort. Princess Illyra still visited often, her presence always bringing calm. She asked him about human customs and listened closely when he explained how medics often stood between soldiers and death. One evening, after a long day of work, Aaron returned to his quarters. The small chamber was simple, with only a bed, a desk, and a narrow window that looked out across the shining city. As he prepared to rest, he heard a knock at his door. When he opened it, he found one of the Seraph guards standing there. The guard's eyes moved quickly, checking the hallway before speaking in a low voice. "There is danger," the guard said firmly. "You should stay close to the palace walls. Enemies move in the city, and their target is not you, but the princess." Aaron felt his chest tighten. "Princess Illyra?" he asked. The guard nodded. "She has spoken too openly about trust with humans. There are those who believe she weakens our people with her compassion. I should not tell you this, but I have seen your loyalty. You should be ready." Before Aaron could ask more, the guard turned and walked away, his silver armor vanishing into the shadows of the corridor. That night, Aaron could not sleep. He paced his room, thoughts heavy. He was not a soldier. He carried no weapon beyond his medic's kit. Yet if danger truly threatened the princess, how could he remain still? His duty was to protect life, and though his oath had never been tested in such a way before, he knew where his heart stood. The next morning, Aaron went to the medical wing as usual, but his eyes were sharper, his senses alert. Every sound in the hall, every shift of shadow, seemed heavier. He found Princess Illyra speaking with several advisors, her voice calm but her expression serious. When she saw him, her face brightened slightly. "Aaron," she said warmly, "come and walk with me." They moved together through the palace gardens. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of glowing flowers and the sound of running water. Yet even here, guards stood at every path. Illyra noticed his quiet gaze and asked, "You seem troubled. Has something happened?" Aaron hesitated, unsure if he should reveal the warning. At last, he decided that truth was better than silence. He told her of the guard's words, of whispers that she was the target of an attack. Illyra stopped walking. For a moment, she did not speak. Then she turned her eyes to the crystal towers around them. "I knew this would come," she said softly. "There are many who oppose me. They say I am young, that I trust too easily, that I invite weakness. But I will not turn away from what I believe. If danger seeks me, then I will face it." Aaron looked at her, surprised by her strength. "You do not fear for your life?" he asked. The princess met his gaze firmly. "Every life has its end. But if mine ends while trying to build peace, then it has meaning. Still, I would not waste it carelessly. That is why I will rely on those who stand beside me. And you, Aaron, though you are not of my people, have already shown me loyalty." Her words struck him deeply. He was only a medic, yet she spoke to him as if he were a guardian. In that moment, Aaron made a silent promise to himself. If danger came, he would not allow harm to touch her. Days passed, and the warning seemed like a shadow that never left. During council gatherings, Aaron remained close to Illyra, standing quietly at the edge of the chamber. His eyes scanned every corner, every hand that reached for a robe, every servant who passed with trays of food. The elders noticed his presence and sometimes questioned why a human medic stood so near the princess, but Illyra always defended him, saying that his presence gave her strength. One afternoon, as the council debated trade agreements, Aaron felt a strange unease. His ears picked up the faintest metallic click from behind a column. He shifted his position, moving closer to Illyra without a word. Nothing happened, but his heart kept racing. Later that night, as he walked back to his quarters, a shadow moved quickly across the hall. A small piece of folded paper was slipped under his door. Aaron picked it up with careful hands. The note was written in Seraph script, but he had learned enough of their language to read it. The words chilled him. They will strike at the next gathering. Protect her if you can. Aaron clenched the note tightly. The warning was no longer rumor. It was certainty. He thought of telling the council, but he feared they would dismiss it or see it as human interference. Instead, he kept it hidden and resolved to act. The following day, Illyra noticed the tired lines on his face. She asked him what troubled him again, but this time he did not tell her. He only said, "Be careful in the coming days." She studied him with quiet eyes, as if she sensed the weight of his words. Then she nodded. "I will." In the days that followed, the palace grew more guarded. Strange figures were reported near the outer walls. Some said they were raiders, others said assassins. The truth was unclear, but everyone felt the tension. Through it all, Aaron stayed near the princess. He did not carry a blade, but he carried determination. He was only one man, a medic, far from his own world. Yet he knew that the test of his oath was near. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, the ones who sought to end the princess's life were already preparing their strike. The great hall of the Seraph Palace was filled with soft light from the crystal windows. Banners of deep blue hung from the tall pillars, and rows of guards stood in silent discipline. Today was another gathering of the council, a moment meant to show unity before the people. The chamber was wide and bright, yet to Aaron it felt heavy with hidden danger. He remembered the note that had been slipped under his door. The words echoed in his mind. They will strike at the next gathering. He could not forget it. As he stood near Princess Illyra, his heart beat faster, not from fear for himself but from fear for her. The council members took their seats, their robes flowing like water as they moved. Illyra stood at the front, her face calm, her presence carrying both grace and strength. She spoke of peace, of the hope that humans and Seraph could build a bond stronger than war. Her voice carried across the chamber, clear and steady. Many listened with respect, but Aaron saw others shift uncomfortably. Not all wished for her vision. Aaron's eyes moved constantly. He studied every servant who entered with trays of food, every guard who shifted his stance, every shadow that fell across the polished floor. His training as a medic had taught him to notice small signs, and now that skill became his shield. For a time, nothing seemed wrong. The council spoke, the guards watched, and the hall carried its usual quiet order. Yet Aaron's instincts kept whispering. He felt the air grow tense, as if the room itself held its breath. Then, without warning, the world broke apart. A sudden roar filled the hall. A hidden charge exploded near one of the pillars, sending a wave of fire and smoke across the chamber. The blast shook the ground, shattering crystal windows and throwing shards of burning metal in every direction. The banners caught flame, and the council leapt to their feet in shock. In that instant, Aaron did not think of himself. His eyes were only on Princess Illyra. He saw the deadly rain of shrapnel racing toward her. His body moved before his mind could even form a thought. He lunged forward, wrapping his arms around her, and turned his back to the explosion. The metal struck him with brutal force. Pain ripped through his side and shoulder as sharp fragments tore into his flesh. His vision blurred with sudden light and shadow, but he held his ground. He felt the princess's body press safely against him, shielded from the blast by his own. The shock wave passed. Smoke filled the air, dust clouded the hall, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the chamber. Aaron staggered but refused to fall. His breath came heavy, and blood ran warm down his side. Still, he kept his arms around Illyra until he was certain the danger had passed. When at last he loosened his hold, the princess looked up at him with wide eyes. Her face, usually so composed, was filled with shock. She saw the blood spreading across his uniform, the shrapnel embedded in his body, and her voice broke with urgency. "You are wounded," she cried. Aaron forced a faint smile, though his body screamed with pain. "Better me than you," he whispered. Guards rushed into the smoke, weapons drawn, capturing those responsible for the attack. Some of the assassins had been hidden among servants, and they were quickly dragged away. The council shouted orders, the hall filled with chaos, but Illyra knelt beside Aaron, her hands trembling as she tried to steady him. "Stay with me," she said, her voice firm though her eyes glistened. "You will not leave me, not after this." Aaron struggled to keep his breath even. His training as a medic guided him through the pain. He pressed his hand against the wound, slowing the bleeding, and spoke to the princess with calm he did not truly feel. "You must stay strong. Your people are watching. Do not let them see fear." Her lips trembled, but she nodded, her strength returning. She called for healers with a commanding voice that echoed through the ruined hall. At once, Seraph healers rushed forward, carrying their crystal instruments. They worked quickly, using beams of light to seal torn flesh, but the wounds were deep, and their technology faltered against the jagged shards buried inside him. Aaron guided them even through his pain. His voice, though strained, explained how to remove the shrapnel without causing greater bleeding. The healers listened carefully, their respect for the human growing with every word. It was strange for them to take instruction from one who was not of their kind, yet in that moment, no one doubted his knowledge. As the treatment continued, Aaron's vision dimmed, and his body weakened. Yet he kept his focus. He thought not of his suffering but of the princess, safe and unbroken by the blast. That thought gave him strength to endure. At last, the healers finished stabilizing him. They lifted him carefully onto a stretcher and carried him out of the hall. Illyra walked beside them, her hand resting gently on his arm as if to remind him that he was not alone. The council chamber lay in ruins, yet the princess stood tall as she addressed the shaken assembly. "You see with your own eyes," she declared, "the courage of this human. He came not as a warrior, yet he shielded me with his own life. If there is anyone who doubts the value of our bond with humanity, let them remember this day." Her words rang across the broken hall, reaching the ears of every guard and elder present. None could deny what they had witnessed. Meanwhile, Aaron was taken to the royal chambers, where he would recover under constant care. His wounds were grave, but his spirit was unbroken. He had given his body to protect another, and in doing so, he had carved a memory into the hearts of all who had seen. For Illyra, the moment was more than survival. She had felt the warmth of his shield, the weight of his sacrifice, and the truth of his words when he said better me than you. That truth would stay with her forever. The explosion had been meant to destroy hope, but instead it lit a fire that could not be extinguished. A human medic, far from his own world, had proven that courage was not measured by weapons but by the willingness to stand in the fire for another. And though his body lay torn and weary, the story of that moment was already spreading beyond the ruined hall, carried on the lips of soldiers and citizens alike. Humanity was no longer a stranger. Humanity had bled for the Seraph. The great hall of the Seraph Palace still smelled of smoke. Shattered crystal littered the floor, banners hung in tatters, and guards worked through the wreckage to secure the area. Outside, the city whispered with shock. The explosion had struck at the heart of their government, yet in the center of the chaos one truth burned brighter than the flames. A human medic had thrown himself into danger to save their princess. Aaron lay on a stretcher as the healers carried him through the palace corridors. His body was weak, blood soaking through the clean cloth wrapped around his side and shoulder. He stayed conscious only by sheer will. His thoughts were slow and heavy, but he repeated one thing in his mind: Illyra is safe. That single truth kept him from slipping into darkness. Princess Illyra walked at his side, her steps quick and her face pale but steady. She refused to leave him. Her robes were stained with ash, her silver hair tangled from the blast, yet her voice carried clear authority as she ordered the healers to treat him in the royal chambers. No one else will tend to him, she declared firmly. He saved my life. His care will be under my eyes. The healers bowed and obeyed. They carried Aaron into a wide chamber where the walls glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled of clean herbs, and a fountain trickled gently in the corner. It was a place meant for rest and healing. They set Aaron upon a long bed of woven crystal threads that shifted to fit his form. At once, the healers worked. They used beams of light to seal torn tissue and placed glowing stones upon his chest to ease his breathing. Yet the shrapnel had caused deep wounds that their tools could not easily mend. Pieces of jagged metal remained lodged within him, and removing them risked further bleeding. Aaron, though faint, opened his eyes. His voice came in low gasps. Leave the large piece in the shoulder for now. Work on the side wound first, or I will lose too much blood. The healers looked at each other in surprise. They were not used to patients directing their care. Still, they listened, for his words carried the knowledge of a trained healer. They followed his guidance, and slowly his bleeding lessened. Illyra remained near, her hands folded tightly together. She watched every motion, her heart pounding each time his breath faltered. She had seen many soldiers wounded in her life, but never had she felt such fear for another. This human had no duty to her people, no oath of loyalty, yet he had taken the blow meant for her. When the immediate danger passed, the healers stepped back. His life is no longer in the balance, one said, but he must rest. The shards cannot be removed until he regains more strength. Illyra gave a nod, then dismissed them gently. When they were gone, she pulled a chair beside his bed and sat close. Aaron's eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow but steady. He turned his head slightly toward her. "You are safe," he whispered. Illyra's throat tightened. "Yes, because of you," she answered softly. "You should not have done it. You could have died." Aaron managed a faint smile. "A healer protects life. That is my duty. No life is greater or lesser. Yours was in danger. I had to act." His words struck her deeply. Among the Serath, many believed in duty, but it was often tied to rank or family. What Aaron described was different. It was a choice born from compassion, not from command. She placed her hand gently upon his uninjured arm. "Rest now," she said firmly. "You have given enough for one day." For the next hours, Illyra remained at his side. She refused to attend council meetings or listen to the advisors who begged her to step away. She wanted the people to see that she honored the man who had saved her. Word spread quickly through the palace. Servants whispered of the human who had shielded the princess, guards spoke of his courage with awe, and even the elders of the council, though cautious, could not ignore the truth. Outside, the city buzzed with stories. Citizens told each other of the human medic who had faced fire without hesitation. Some who once looked at Aaron with suspicion now spoke his name with respect. For the first time, humanity was not seen as reckless outsiders, but as allies worth trusting. As night fell, Illyra stayed awake, watching over Aaron. His sleep was uneasy, his body restless as pain worked through him. She cooled his forehead with a damp cloth and whispered words of comfort, though she was unsure if he heard them. In the quiet of that chamber, she thought of what he had said to her in the gardens days before. He had told her that pain was not only of the body, but also of the spirit. Now she understood. The people of her world carried fear and doubt, wounds that no crystal tool could heal. Perhaps what her people needed was not only strength, but also compassion like his. The next morning, the council demanded to see her. She went reluctantly, leaving Aaron under guard. In the council hall, the elders spoke of the attack. Some called for harsher measures against the rebels. Others demanded more distance from humanity, fearing the explosion was tied to the presence of the human envoy. Illyra stood tall and raised her voice. "You all saw with your own eyes what happened. A human who came only to heal shielded me with his body. If you believe humans bring danger, then you must also see that they bring courage greater than our own. Do not speak of distance. Speak of unity, for today we owe my life to one of them." Her words silenced the chamber. No one could argue with what they had witnessed. The council could not openly oppose her after such a display, though their faces showed unease. Meanwhile, Aaron stirred awake again in his chamber. His body was weak, but his mind was clear. He thought of the blast, of the searing pain, and of the moment when Illyra had looked up at him with wide eyes. He wondered if she truly understood why he had done it. To him, it was simple. Life was precious, and no healer could stand by while another perished. When Illyra returned to his side, she sat beside him again. He looked at her with tired eyes and asked, "Did they believe you?" She nodded. "They cannot deny what you did. You have given them more than speeches ever could. You have given them proof." Aaron closed his eyes with relief. "Then it was worth it?" Illyra's voice softened. "Do not speak as if you were lost. You are not lost. You are here, and you will heal. And when you stand again, I will make sure every Serath knows what your courage means." Her words carried both promise and determination. For the first time since the explosion, Aaron allowed himself to relax. His body still ached with every breath, but his spirit felt lighter. He had done what he must, and now the bond between their worlds was stronger than ever. The aftermath of the explosion had left the palace scarred, but it had also lit a new fire of trust. And at the center of it lay a human medic, wounded but unbroken, watched over by the princess whose life he had saved. The days that followed were quiet inside the royal chambers. The city outside remained restless, but within those walls the sound of Aaron's slow breathing and the soft trickle of the healing fountain filled the air. The palace guards stood watch at every corner, and the servants whispered when they walked past, but inside the chamber it was only the human medic and the alien princess. Aaron's body healed slowly. The wounds were deep, and though the Seraph healers had sealed much of the damage, fragments of shrapnel still remained. He could not rise from the bed without pain, and even speaking for long left him drained. Yet he did not complain. He endured each day with the patience of one who had seen suffering before. Princess Illyra never left his side for long. She brought him food when he could eat, she adjusted the cushions behind his back, and she listened when he wished to speak. At first, she believed her presence was only to comfort him, but as the days stretched on, she realized that she herself drew comfort from him. One evening, when the stars shone bright through the tall crystal windows, Aaron stirred awake. Illyra sat by the bed, a book of ancient records in her lap. She looked up when she saw his eyes open. "You should be resting," she said softly. "I have rested enough," Aaron answered, though his voice was weak. "Tell me, how fares your people after the attack?" Illyra closed the book and folded her hands. "They are shaken. The council struggles to agree. Some call for war against the rebels. Others call for more walls and more fear. Yet among the people, something has changed. They speak of you. They tell the story of the human who stood before fire to save their princess." Aaron gave a faint smile. "Stories fade. Wounds remain." "Not all stories fade," she replied firmly. "Some become the bond that holds people together. You may not see it, but your act has already begun to heal more than just me." Aaron's eyes softened at her words. He had never sought honor, yet he could not deny that something new stirred between their worlds. The following morning, Illyra led a group of healers into the chamber to attempt the removal of the remaining shrapnel. Aaron gritted his teeth as the sharp pain returned. The healers worked carefully, but it was Illyra's steady hand upon his arm that kept him from faltering. When at last the final piece was drawn out, the healers declared that his body would now mend without further danger. That night, Illyra remained awake while Aaron slept. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, and she thought of how easily she might have lost him. The thought filled her with unease, yet also with strength. She whispered softly, though he did not stir, "You are no longer only a healer of humans. You are the healer of my people too." The bond between them deepened as the days passed. Aaron began to sit upright without pain, and soon he was able to walk slowly across the chamber with her support. Each small step was a victory. When he faltered, she steadied him. When he grew weary, she reminded him that patience was part of healing. One afternoon, as they walked together along the quiet palace balcony, Aaron stopped to rest against the railing. The city stretched out below, its towers of crystal catching the sunlight. He gazed across the horizon and said, "Your world is beautiful. Yet beauty often hides wounds. I see both in these streets." Illyra nodded. "You see what many of us try to ignore. We have built high towers, yet there are cracks within them. That is why your courage struck so deeply. It showed us what we have forgotten." Aaron turned his eyes toward her. "What is that?" "That a single life matters, no matter the risk," she said firmly. "You taught us this without words." Silence followed, but it was a peaceful silence. The bond between them no longer needed constant speech. As Aaron's strength returned, the council grew impatient. They summoned Illyra again, urging her to prepare for stricter measures against the rebels. Some feared that humans might have played a hidden role in the attack, though no evidence supported such claims. Illyra defended Aaron and humanity at every turn. She told the council that distrust would only deepen the divisions. She reminded them that when danger struck, it was not a Seraph warrior who shielded her, but a human healer who asked for nothing in return. Her words carried weight, yet the council remained divided. Tension lingered in every chamber of the palace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Illyra returned to Aaron's side. She found him seated near the window, his hands resting lightly on his knees. He looked stronger now, though the scars of his wounds would remain. "You fight for me in those chambers," he said quietly. "I fight for truth," she answered. "But I will not deny that you are a part of that truth. Without you, I would not be here to speak at all." Aaron looked down for a moment, his voice low. "I only did what any healer should do." Illyra stepped closer. "No, Aaron. You did what many would not have dared. That is why your choice has power. That is why it has bound us." Her words lingered in the air. For the first time, Aaron felt the weight of something greater than duty. It was not only about saving a life. It was about the connection that had grown in the shadow of fire and pain. That night, as the stars spread across the sky, they sat side by side near the window. Neither spoke much, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was filled with understanding. The bond between the human medic and the alien princess had been forged in sacrifice and strengthened in trust. Far below, the city lights shimmered. Whispers spread through the streets of a new hope, a new friendship that might bridge two worlds. Some doubted, some resisted, but many began to believe. Within the quiet chamber, Aaron finally allowed himself to rest without fear. And Illyra, watching him with calm eyes, knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Yet she also knew that together they had the strength to face it. The bond they shared was no longer just between two lives. It was the beginning of a bond between two peoples, a bond written not in treaties or councils, but in courage, compassion, and trust. The palace stood tall against the morning sky. Sunlight spilled across its towers of crystal, and the wounds of the attack slowly faded as workers restored the broken halls. Yet while the walls were being rebuilt, something far greater was taking shape. Trust was growing where there had once been suspicion. At the center of this change stood a human medic and a princess of the Seraph. Aaron's body was still weak, but his strength returned more each day. He walked carefully with a staff for balance, his steps slow but steady. The scars on his side and shoulder marked him, but they no longer pained him as before. He was alive, and with each step he felt his spirit rise. Princess Illyra remained close. She guided him through the palace gardens where flowers bloomed in patterns of light. She took him to the balconies where the city stretched into the distance, alive with energy. Everywhere they went, people whispered and bowed. The story of the human who shielded their princess had become more than a tale. It had become a symbol. The council could not ignore the tide of public feeling. At first, they had resisted, arguing that humans could not be trusted, but every day the voices of the people grew stronger. Merchants in the markets spoke of humans with respect. Children pretended to act out the scene of the medic saving the princess, their laughter echoing through the streets. What once had been doubt was turning into admiration. One afternoon, the council summoned Illyra and Aaron together. The hall was filled with the elders, their faces stern yet curious. Aaron walked slowly into the chamber, leaning on his staff, but his posture was proud. Illyra stood at his side. An elder spoke first. "Human, you came to our world as a healer. You had no duty to us, yet you risked your life for our princess. Why?" Aaron's voice was steady though quiet. Because life has worth. Whether human or seraph, a healer does not measure value by blood or crown. She was in danger. I could not stand aside. The hall fell silent. The words were simple, yet they struck deep. Even those who doubted humanity could not deny the truth of his act. Another elder leaned forward. What do you ask in return? Aaron shook his head. Nothing. I did not act for reward. I acted because it was right. The council members looked to one another. For the first time, there was no sharp division in their voices. They saw what the people already knew. This human had shown them a courage that demanded respect. Illyra then stepped forward. Her voice carried clear across the chamber. Let this act not be forgotten. Let it be the bridge between our worlds. If one human can show such sacrifice, then imagine what we may achieve together. We must not let fear guide us. We must let hope lead us. The elders bowed their heads, and at last, the council gave its decision. The seraph would open their gates to cooperation with humanity. They would no longer treat them as outsiders, but as partners. When the news spread through the city, the people celebrated. Bells rang from towers, lights shone across the plazas, and voices lifted in song. For the first time in many generations, the seraph felt the promise of a future not bound by isolation. In the quiet of the palace gardens that evening, Aaron and Illyra walked together. The air was cool, and the stars began to appear in the sky. Aaron paused beside a fountain and rested, his hand upon the stone. You have changed the fate of your people, he said to her. Illyra shook her head gently. No, Aaron. We changed it together. Without you, I would not be here. Without your act, my words would carry no weight. It is your courage that gave me strength. Aaron smiled faintly. Then perhaps it was meant to be. Not by design, but by choice. They sat together upon the edge of the fountain, the sound of water flowing softly beside them. For a while, they said nothing, letting the peace of the moment settle around them. At last, Illyra spoke again. What will you do now? When you are fully healed, will you return to your people? Aaron looked up at the stars. My duty as a healer does not end. Whether here or among my own kind, I will go where life needs protection. But if you ask whether I will leave, then I say this. I will not turn away from those who trust me. If your people call upon me, I will remain. Illyra's eyes softened. Then I hope you remain. For you are more than a healer now. You are part of our story. Their bond was no longer unspoken. It was clear to both of them that what had begun in the moment of an explosion had grown into something enduring. A connection between two souls, and a bridge between two peoples. The following weeks brought further change. Human envoys arrived in the city, not as guests under suspicion but as honored partners. Seraph healers and human medics worked side by side, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. Soldiers who once guarded with suspicion now trained together, preparing to defend both worlds against threats that might come. Aaron was often seen in the healing halls, guiding younger seraph healers with gentle patience. His knowledge of human medicine blended with their crystal techniques, creating methods neither people had imagined before. Where once there had been distance, now there was cooperation. Princess Illyra stood at the heart of these efforts, speaking to her people with calm strength. She reminded them often of the night the palace shook with fire, and of the human who stepped forward without hesitation. Each time she spoke, she looked to Aaron, and he bowed his head humbly, though he knew the truth of her words. Time passed, and the scars of the explosion healed both on the palace walls and within the hearts of the people. Yet the memory of that day remained, not as a wound, but as a turning point. On a quiet evening, long after the city had settled into calm, Aaron and Illyra once again walked the gardens. The sky above was filled with stars, and the air carried the scent of blooming flowers. Illyra stopped and looked at him. "Do you ever regret it? Throwing yourself into danger?" Aaron shook his head firmly. "No. If I had to choose again, I would choose the same. Because that choice gave us this future." Illyra smiled, her eyes bright with unspoken gratitude. "Then let this be our path. Not just yours or mine, but ours together. A path for both our people." They stood side by side, looking toward the horizon. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but it no longer felt fragile. It felt strong, bound not by fear but by trust. The human medic who once came as a stranger now stood as a symbol of unity. And the alien princess who once faced death now stood as the voice of a new beginning. Together, they faced the future, not as two worlds apart, but as one.